You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense with your host, Doug Thorpe. Here's Doug.
Hello again, everyone. This is Doug Thorpe, and you're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense. From time to time, I have guests on this show that bring us some very special information, and today is going to be one of those kinds of programs. I have a guest. Her name is Kathy Galloway. Kathy, welcome to the show.
Hey, Doug. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be with you.
And if you're watching in the video, but we will talk about it for those of you streaming right now, we are going to talk about veterans, U.S. military personnel, former and present, that are looking for opportunities to transition. Maybe they've already made the transition, but they're looking for additional support and ideas. And for those of you who are employers, you may or may not know of programs that can help with attracting highly motivated, highly skilled talent from the veteran community. And Kathy herself is a veteran, and thank you for your service, Kathy. Tell us a little bit about that service journey that you were on.
Oh, great. Thanks for asking. Love to share that part of my life. So I grew up as a Navy kid and really just learned to appreciate my country. As a Girl Scout, as a military dependent, really fundamentally understood the importance that each one of us has as a citizen of this great nation to serve, to give back. And so all I really wanted to do was to have a full military career. Did not join the Navy, instead joined the Air Force, which my dad was fine with. I spent 29 years in the either active duty, reserve, or guard. My first choice career was Air Force nursing. And then halfway through my career, I transitioned over into public affairs. The crowning achievement of my military career then, Doug, was to establish a never been done before outreach program in response to 9/11 to educate and engage civilians in support of troops and their families. Because as many of our listeners may or may not know, in the reserve component, 80% of them are part-time. So that means they either have a full-time civilian job or they're going to school full-time. So our employers immediately certainly were affected by the deployments of the reserve component. And so that's where it started. We really wanted to ensure employers understood the value of veteran talent and felt like and understood that they were an important part of the national security team, so that they really kind of understood and felt supported in managing the absences of their employees, and felt like they were really a part of the team. And then we reached out to other groups. So that's kind of a Cliff Note version.
Yeah, you packed several things into that stream there, and I want to break it apart a little bit. First off, I think, is the understanding and appreciation for the spirit, the heart, and the mind that says, I want to put on a uniform, I want to go to training, and I want to defend this great nation. That is a mindset that is frankly not common among everyone. I think there are many certainly who appreciate folks that will do that, but for the individual, male or female, that makes that choice and goes that direction, it does create a life-changing series of events. Go ahead.
Yes. Well, yeah. Sure it does. I mean, our country spends millions of dollars to transition someone from being a civilian to a warrior, which of course is absolutely essential. The discipline, the teamwork, the risk-taking, the stamina, the stoicism. I mean, all those things are really necessary for military service, because you have to be willing to do really hard things, in the name of freedom. And it takes a certain mindset, a certain physical ability, a certain intellectual ability to really do those things. But Doug, when we finish military service, we don't spend millions of dollars per person on helping them transition home. It's really disappointing and a big gap in our society to help a military member transition, culturally from their military mindset to behaviors that, are essential in the military work that are also very important in civilian work and in our community work, but it's very different. Not only is there a huge loss of identity, but things like communication style are different, or maybe seriousness of purpose, or maybe discipline and motivation. Those things are oftentimes different too, because of the cultural differences between military and civilian life. And so we have a long way to go to really help our service members transition well at work and transition well back home in their communities.
I've always found there's a fundamental irony in the challenge that recruiters and hiring managers talk about, and that is they struggle connecting the dots, taking the military experience and aligning that with job requirements and transferable so-called civilian skills. But in reality, there is an amazingly strong overlap of skills that are learned and developed in the military that can contribute immense value to a business effort.
Well, thank you. Thank you for saying that. I think most everyone would agree that military people are natural leaders. They're disciplined. They have strong work ethics. But where it gets a little bit and are values based, right? Where it gets a little messy is that you think, okay, well, how do I take someone who is an infantryman who really goes out into the battlefield and does the hard work on the battlefield? How do I take that military occupational specialty code and translate it into something that works in the civilian workforce where there is no battle, right? Well, thank goodness there's very effective tools, military skills translators. ONET is my favorite. And you can really put in there a military MOS, and you'll get a list of civilian jobs that infantryman is eligible for, plus the knowledge, skills, and abilities. And there's also a military crosswalk where you can put in the civilian title and get the military jobs that will meet the requirements for those. And it's just really important to remember that that military skills are highly transferable, that military people are just really good students. They're used to being trained, and then trained some more and applying what they learn. And, they know how to meet mission. And then what that means is, meet the requirement, if not exceed the requirement. And most of our people are highly motivated, want to contribute, are all about mission focus. And so if you're lucky enough to get one of those people and hire for aptitude and train, there's really a great return on investment for that. But you got to dig a little deeper. Maybe they may not have the exact job experience that you have, but holy cow, I think in my life I've had like 17 different jobs in 6 different industries, and we're just highly adaptable. And that's one of the primary skills that employers seek, is someone who can be adaptable, who, and now this day and age, is tech savvy and, can really help strengthen your workforce.
I think back, I'll tell a really quick story in my own transfer out of military into civilian work. I was recruited by and went to interview at a large regional bank. And several of the gentlemen on the interview panel process that we went through were themselves ex-military. So they immediately said, Doug's ready to go in one of our management jobs. I was an officer. I had certainly led teams and units of a function. So I knew how to manage people and process. So these guys were all in favor, but our HR director said, no, all new officer personnel of the bank must go through our officer training program. And there was quite an intramural battle, apparently, or at least so I'm told. But in the end, the HR director prevailed. She said, well, in his case, the only thing I would concede, I'll cut the program from 9 months to 6 months,
Wow.
but he will be on the program. And you know
Sure.
what? I have to say, kudos to her.
Yeah.
Great, great
Yeah.
wisdom and insight. It
Yeah.
was a real boost to my own transition to be able to go through that program, make the migration, do
I
a
bet.
slower transition, and
Yes.
all the while, to your point, learning a whole lot about the nuts and bolts of how the bank really
Sure.
operated.
Sure. Well,
And to
you
this
did.
day, it's a huge, plus mark in my profile.
Well, I love hearing you say that because, it's easy to make a lot of assumptions, but, I mean, leadership, as you know, is influence, nothing more, nothing less. I borrow that from John Maxwell. That's, at the end of the day, that's what it is. But I suggest to you that influencing a military member in uniform who is highly motivated, usually, and certainly highly disciplined, knowing that, it is your job, to follow lawful orders, to follow reasonable orders that are right-minded. We just have a different approach to kind of, getting the work done. And so there's a transition process, a transition time frame, not only in our in every way, right? Maybe the sense of urgency, maybe how you build teams and how you offer feedback. Those things are very real, and it does take time. So kudos to your HR person for really making
Holding
you
the
go through
line.
that program. Yeah, holding the
Yeah, holding
line.
the
Yeah,
line on it.
exactly.
Well, the other side of that coin, I think, I had a gentleman on my show earlier this year who talked about he himself was not ex-military, but he had a bit of a campaign he was on. He was cautioning business leaders who themselves were not military to stop using military vernacular to talk about their business. We have to take the hill. We have to win this war. We have to
Oh,
win this battle. Things,
yeah.
phraseology that you hear in the work world. And it was interesting to hear his. I'm not sure what his original motivation was on why he kind of gravitated that direction, but
Well,
he
he
was
was this leader was using that vernacular for all employees, right? Not
right,
just the
right,
military. Okay, all right,
right,
interesting. Yeah.
right. And my guest, he was a guest on the show, and his point was he felt as though bona fide service members who had had those experiences didn't need to be subjected to that in the work world because it was different. They were in fact not taking a hill. They might have had a project or a deadline
Right.
or a
Yeah.
market opportunity to go
Sure.
conquer,
Yeah.
but the effort to get there would not be anyone at risk with
Hmm.
bullets flying through the air,
Hmm.
during
Well,
that business campaign.
certainly he was trying to rally the troops, so to speak, and inspire and motivate people, and that's understandable. But it's all about being sensitive culturally to the recipient who might be hearing that message, right? And so maybe that might be a little off target, if you will.
Right, right.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, speaking of that, so let's talk about some of the current events in the work world now, and how are you seeing things evolve for initiatives that are supporting
Mm.
service members and veterans making transition, but there's so much going on in the business world now with DEI campaigns and programs, everything about diversion, equality, and inclusion. That
Well,
I'll just start with that one. That's one
well,
of, that's top of mind.
Well, and so DEI and B for belonging. That's the most recent phraseology. And before I go there, Doug, I want to back up and say that it is an exciting time in our nation because veteran unemployment is at historic lows and is typically below 3%, no matter when you look at the data. But unfortunately, veteran underemployment continues to be pretty high, 30%, or I've seen one statistic, it's like 15 times greater than it might be for a non-veteran employee. And so, the demand for veteran talent continues to be fierce and growing. We've got lots of nonprofits and industry specific initiations, programs, initiatives is what I meant to say. People are getting in the game, and everywhere I go, my goal is to drive up the demand for veteran talent, and the state governments getting involved, and it's just everywhere you look, you see a lot of programs trying to attract veteran talent. States are getting into that business as well. Come live in our state. We'll take care of you, and we're going to get you a great job. I hope we can do that more and better in Arizona. If any veterans out there are listening, we've got a great manufacturing industry. Come join us, and it's a highly friendly veteran ecosystem. But so that's the good news. It's certainly very different from yesteryear of what our Vietnam veterans experienced, and yet the programs that prepare our veteran job seekers are lukewarm at best. There's some exciting programs happening that help veterans really have a different mindset, and there's more and more programming to help employers. So let's talk about DEI and B for a minute. Recently attended a half-day conference with a 30-year DE&I professional, and he commented that you can't just get up and give a 1 hour or 2 hour or multi-hour presentation briefing on how to be more inclusive, right? I mean, DE&I, diversity and inclusion, is wrestling with really tough stuff that is highly embedded in our thinking and our culture and biases, right? And so there's never a finish line in the diversity and inclusion world, but I would like to offer and perpetuate the notion of creating ways to have shared experiences, to share stories, to share understanding, to build trusted relationships, not just offer, a one-way PowerPoint, hey, any questions, but create activities in the workplace or anywhere that put people together who are different from one another, and really kind of force them, maybe lead them with some, give them some leading questions or some activities, because it takes time to develop those trusting relationships. And that's very true for military veterans as well. I mean, we already feel very disconnected. 55% of Iraq and Afghanistan veterans feel disconnected. For women veterans, it's sometimes even a little more awkward. Just because of social norms and sometimes misunderstandings or stigmas that are associated. We all have those biases and lack of understanding. So any way you can build familiarity and understanding is a great tactic, so to speak, for your DE&I initiative. But for now, the entry point for most veteran hiring is diversity, equity, inclusion. I contend that it is really a talent acquisition, attraction, and retention strategy. Certainly, it's part of DE&I, but it's a broader opportunity. A business can make a broader investment by really seeing it as a talent acquisition and recruitment strategy. Does that answer your question, or at least offer feedback?
No, that's great. I think that does parallel a lot of the things I hear from my client companies and things they're wrestling with and struggling with. So to your point, absolutely, DEI is not a one and done kind of workshop presentation. It needs to be woven into the culture. The discussions need to be ongoing. The programs need to be ongoing. We've talked about it enough. Let's go get some things done.
And I think the ERGs, BRGs, employee resource groups, business resource groups, if you're a company large enough that has that nestled within your DE&I initiative, if you're a smaller company, I encourage you to develop something, that captures the veteran's voice, be it a council, a committee, just some way. I think it's particularly helpful for veterans. They need the mutual support to help them transition. The bonding is quick. The mentoring is amazing. And the opportunity for the employer to benefit from their collective voice is great. They're going to have ideas about how to improve efficiencies. They're going to have ideas about how to help other veteran hires do well. What employer wouldn't want to hear that information and, most importantly, respond to it and apply what they learned from their veterans' voice, be it through an ERG, BRG, or just a committee that a smaller employer pulls together to help those veterans be heard. I mean, everybody wants to, most people want to be heard, but I think, veterans bring a lot of skills, values, and experiences that will benefit the civilian workforce, and I think they should be heard.
Agreed. Totally agreed. Well, let's talk a little bit about, I guess I'm going to call it two sides of the coin. So let's start first with that service member who might be listening and struggling themselves with making their transition or gaining that full employment, not just the underemployed. They might have a paycheck, but it's not everything they know they really can deliver. What are some of the things we should encourage them to think about in continuing the journey to make a successful transition?
Well, I feel like you're setting me up here, boss, for a leadership professional growth answer, which is really important, right? Is that kind of where you're going with this? As a John Maxwell speaker trainer coach, I really get how little we as Americans tend to invest in our own personal and professional growth. And veterans have a lot of skills and attributes and values to contribute at work. However, it's not like we spend hours figuring out what our strengths are, hours understanding what gives me meaning and purpose. We have some leadership development training, of course, but it truly is an investment in ourselves to really take seriously, okay, what are my strengths? Where do I feel most valued? What gives me the most satisfaction? Because once you understand those things, that's where you're going to excel, right? And, in our experience in the military, we're more used to responding to the needs of the military, the needs of the particular workforce versus our needs. That's why we're so highly adaptable. We're not robots. We're highly adaptable. But when you get out, when you take off the uniform, it's important for you to really have your own vision, your own goals, and move in those directions. And that takes investment, maybe coaching, personal growth, leadership growth, career coaching. All those things are really valuable. And if a veteran's listening, I encourage you to pay for it yourself. Go get it. Find quality experts to help you really enrich your life so that you know where you're going to find the most meaning. It just doesn't come to you. You've got to work at it. You've got to work at it. That's the biggest lesson, I think.
I agree with you. And for the experience I've had in working with folks in career transition, what I learned a long time ago is to encourage them to take a moment and really do the work to reconnect with that personal sense of purpose.
Yes.
Because we can get spun up, we can get busy, and we can even get moved through a career progression. Maybe it's promotions, maybe it's advancement, deployments, reassignments. And over time, all of a sudden, you run the risk of waking up one day and saying, who am I and where am I going? Well,
Right.
What is this all about?
Right.
And particularly when you're faced, and this is true for everyone, even in the civilian workforce, when you're faced with a transition, the job went away. In this case, for the veterans, their time in service was done. They're now separated. That's a major pivot point.
Major.
and you need to reset the foundation and be sure you know what your launch pad is. You know, where are you coming from mentally, emotionally, and what are the things that could be motivators for you? Yes, we can build your list of skills and abilities, but let's, even before we go there, let's start with working on that sense of purpose.
Absolutely, because that purpose and mission really drives military people. They're used to doing something bigger and better than themselves. And over again, when I go out into veteran career hiring events, I hear veterans speak about their employers. And one of the first things they say about uh, satisfied employees is the sense of mission that their work gives them. So if you know, it's really fundamental to life to know who you are and what gives you that meaning, and it's worth investing in. Maybe you take a job that kind of helps pays the bills, but always, always, always have your eye on the ball, looking towards who am I, what legacy do I want to leave, what really makes me tick, because A, that's where you'll be most successful. B, you could probably make good money at it. And C, you're going to be happiest.
Right, right. And I always quote Mark Twain, who was attributed with saying 2 important days in an individual's life: the day they were born and the day they figure out why.
Oh, I love that.
And I couldn't agree more with that sentiment. And
Yeah.
I've got dozens, if not hundreds, of cases of individuals who have agreed to sit down, take a minute, do that work, really think about it. And then there are tools and abilities, and a
Lots.
well-trained coach like myself or you, Kathy, could really help someone go through that process so they can come to that conclusion and have that personal vision for where they want to go and what they want to be about.
Mhm. Well, I enjoy coaching employers to help them know where to source talent and how to maximize their investment in this talent to help them build stronger workforces. Veteran Talent Academy is something I do a couple times a year, and one course focuses on fundamentals. The other is more on advanced individual training. I call it a pun on words, but we go more into retention and messaging and onboarding. And so I invite anybody who's listening to participate in that, and to reach out if you'd like to build your talent attraction and retention strategy. It's about developing trusting relationships, trusting partnerships with sources of veteran talent, distinguishing your company as veteran friendly locally and nationally, depending on where you hire people from, and then continuing to be involved in the veteran community, and then implementing best practices that that have been successful in other companies. So that's my life's calling. My life's calling is to cultivate civilian veteran champions, and that's what my book is all about.
Yeah, so let's talk about your book. The title, there's an image of it on the video here: Beyond Thank You for Your Service. That's I know that's a popular and wonderful sentiment when someone sees a service member, but talk a little more about the inspiration for that title.
Oh, okay. Well, I wanted it to be something that resonated with civilians, that is just well known and popular. And the remaining part of the title is the Veteran Champion Handbook for Civilians. So it's chock full of practical strategies, no matter where you are in life. If you're an employer, a lawyer, a healthcare provider, an educator, or a member of faith communities, there's practical strategies in there that anybody can use from their circle of influence to improve quality of life, workforce, and community. And it's founded on the notion of building, really just being purposeful about building trusting relationships, going beyond words into actions that really promote engagement, understanding, and benefit for all those concerned. A veteran champion is someone who creates mutually beneficial activities and services from wherever you sit. And so we need to go beyond. We need to be thinking about that in our daily work. No action is too small. It's not rocket science, it's people science. So there's just so much that, anybody who's listening can do. The book is available on Amazon. I want to transition just real quickly back to that personal experience, or no, the gentleman who was saying, let's take the hill to his employees, and how that resonated, with the veteran guest that you were speaking with. Beyond thank you for your service has sort of a similar, I've had similar kind of conversations with others or companies. And one company was saying that the veterans and their employee was like, well, they're not sure they want to hear that. Because, it sometimes, and maybe some ways it's not real. It could be more, it may be too superficial, or, oh, you don't really understand what I've been through, or, just some uncertainty. And so some of the other phrases that I think are worthy to be considered are, thank you for wearing the uniform. How does that hit you when you hear that phrase, Doug, as a military person?
That actually does, just on the cuff, that has a different and slightly deeper meaning than thank you for your service.
Yes. And to me, it means, oh my gosh, that when I wear that uniform, I have a huge sense of pride. You understand that it represents the, American flag, if you will. You understand the discipline and sacrifice that it took for me to wear this uniform. You understand that I had to make sure I could pass the PT test, and I had to do push-ups and sit-ups and make sure I made time for that so I could pass. I mean, that's sort of silly, but it's true. I mean, the uniform represents so much to those of us who wear it. Or the other thing you might consider is, thank you for your service and sacrifice. Because certainly we're grateful that people thank us for our service, but if you can, do it with the right affect, body language, so that the veteran really feels that, you really mean it, and that it's as special to you as it is to them who wear the uniform, right? It's not a comment that's made simply in passing. It's a comment that we appreciate, but that can have even deeper meaning depending on how you might want to approach it.
I love it. Well, you covered the other side of the coin when I asked you the question. We talk about the veterans' kind of duties and obligations to make the transition. The next part of that, the flip side of the coin, was the employers need to understand and look for and think about opportunity as well. And I think you covered that nicely. I think at least what's going through my mind is the idea that I think the average small business owner, on one hand, not making excuses, but they generally don't have time to think about the nuances of the different pieces of their company. They think in terms of, I've got to hire somebody to do X.
Right.
They usually don't take it another layer and say, what might be the best source of a person that would have that skill and could bring that value to my company? They usually don't go quite that far in the thinking, and arguably they should, but the reality is they just don't. And unless the company has matured a little bit, formalized a few more of their process and systems support ideas, they may not be pulling those triggers and thinking at that level. So I think raising the awareness of the possibility and getting them to have that consideration that a really good talent pool might be right down the street in the form of some local organization, some local chapter of a national program, something like that they could really tap into.
Well, and sometimes it takes a little bit of digging to find those organizations, okay? But, typically if we have that awareness, then things start becoming more apparent. So if you're thinking, your mindset is, oh yeah, I know veterans would be really helpful in my workforce. Where can I find them? Well, I would encourage you to talk to your local chamber of commerce. They may have some ideas. Okay. It depends on how prevalent military people are in your local state, but a chamber is a great place to start. You might get a no. Also, I would look at sort of your state-wide job board. Many states offer, elevation of veteran candidates, or you can flag your company as a veteran-friendly candidate so that veterans know to seek after you. And then there's national programs like Hire Our Heroes that have job boards. Recruit Military has career fairs across the nation. But just start putting up your radar a little bit about, or just asking around, where can I find, if there's a National Guard base or a active duty base close by. Start asking questions and be persistent. If you'd like some more information, I do offer directories of statewide of Maricopa and Central Ohio directories with people's names, but also, kind of a nationwide directory. So you know places to start. Just, understand, give that, if you have a resume that comes across your desk that someone has military experience, I encourage you to put it at the top of the pack. And many companies, regardless of their size, will make sure that veteran job seeker gets a phone call, gets an interview, and then you just got to be creative about figuring out where could that veteran fit in. And, hopefully you hire for aptitude and train. You stand to gain mightily if you do so.
I love it. And very good caveat there at the end. And a message to the business owners out there, and this is just a key principle in my own coaching practice. When it comes to the people side of your business, you need to hire first for the sense of value and purpose that a person can bring, because you can match up and you can train on skills and abilities. But most of the time people have that upside down. They go looking first for the skill, and then they worry about the behavior and the mindset separately. And that's where the wheels usually come off.
Absolutely. And you know what? That happens no matter where you are transitioning. Just a quick story. I was a nurse at the 121st Air Refueling Wing in Columbus, Ohio, a part-time nurse, a traditional guardsman. Okay. And an opening came up for a full-time position as an executive officer. And I applied, and I was hired based on aptitude and trained, even within military to military position. I didn't know anything about operational flying or, how to run a wing. And, because I had the personality and the values, even within the military organization, I was given that opportunity. My boss said, I'd rather hire for nice and train, right? It was tough for me to come up to speed, but I did it and loved it, and made a big difference. I would consider that a high impact hire, because I made a difference.
Well, to that point, it's a popular phrase among all the HR people I've ever known that people get hired on skill and they get fired on behavior.
Oh, mm-hmm.
And taking that thought, I go the other way when I talk to business owners who have a hiring opportunity. Do everything you can to interview about behavior, and then see what the match is on the skill. And certainly, you've got to judge the mountain to climb on the training. But I wouldn't necessarily, to use a military analogy, I wouldn't necessarily hire an aircraft mechanic to be my pilot, because the training there might be a bit too far. But there are overlaps that can work, and you can do that work. But the point is, all too often we're so hardline focused on the skill we think we need, And does somebody know anything about that? And we plug somebody in, and they've got a mindset, a personal set of values that is contrary to everything we're trying to build as a brand in a company.
Just real quick, 90% of the military occupations have a direct civilian equivalent. You just gotta look a little bit, use those military skills translators to figure out how to make those matches that will that'll make you real happy and give the veteran a new purpose and hopefully sense of belonging.
Well, very good. Well, on that note, Kathy, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for sitting in. Folks, we're going to have contact info in the show notes here on how to get a hold of Kathy and all of her references that she's cited here for us. We're not going to walk back through that right now, but one last time, Kathy, thank you for sitting in. I really appreciate you sharing with us.
Well, Doug, thank you for your service and for being that veteran advocate and getting the word out about the value of veteran talent and how civilians can become veteran champions in their own right. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
You're very welcome. And with that, folks, we are going to wrap it up, say goodbye, and I want to wish you to go out there and make it a great day. We'll see you again real soon. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense, hosted by Doug Thorpe. If you would like to know more about the coaching and advisory services he provides, visit dougthorpe.com.